introduction like that, one preacher once stood up, he said, I think I now know what a pancake feels like to have syrup poured all over it. Just kind of really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Glad that I get to be with you tonight. Glad that you're here. I often understand that you can do anything you want on a Saturday night. And coming to be with the Lord's people, thinking about things of the Lord, thinking about spiritual things is just so encouraging to me. And I appreciate your presence. In the beginning was matter, and matter begot the amoeba, and the amoeba begot the worm begot the fish begot the amphibian begot the lower mammal begot the lemur begot the monkey begot the man who imagined God. This is the genealogy of man. That is almost a verbatim quote from an atheist by the name of George Smith. In a nutshell, he has put into reality for us, in a statement of, if there is no God, then everything you see in this universe popped into existence from nothing. Somehow life formed from non-living chemicals. And that first single-celled life changed from one kind of life to every kind of life that we see in this universe. We are told that that's the scientific approach. We're told that that is the approach that people who are thoughtful people, that people who are intelligent people, people who want to follow the evidence where it leads, we're told that that's the direction they go. If you were to then flesh that out, what you would find is they would say that 13.82 billion years ago, there was a tiny singularity, and that singularity was something that exploded, and that explosion they call the Big Bang. And from that Big Bang, you had basically everything we see come into existence. Started out with hydrogen atoms, and then ultimately stars, and those stars cooked more elements, and they exploded, etc., and here we are. Now there's another idea I'm sure you're very familiar with. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the water. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God divided light from the darkness. The light he called day, the darkness he called night, and evening and morning, day one. And then subsequently day two, he created the expanse, the firmament. Day three, he created the flowers, grass, and trees, all the plants and vegetation. Day four, the sun, moon, and stars. Day five, all of the flying and swimming creatures. Day six, humans and land-living animals. And on the seventh day, he stopped his creative activity. Now, those are the two ideas. You have to decide which one of those you're going to believe. What you are told is one of those ideas is based on evidence, and the other is based on faith. And when someone says faith, what they mean by that, and we're going to get into that in the Sunday morning class period, what generally speaking most people mean by faith is that it's not based on evidence, but what we're going to see is faith is absolutely based on evidence, but we won't get into that tonight. What I'm going to show you tonight is if all you wanted to do was follow the evidence where it led, if you just were to say, I'm not going to believe anything other than what the evidence proves, which of those two conclusions would an honest-hearted person arrive at? Well, here's one of the issues. One of the issues is we're told that a scientific idea is an idea that explains things, but you have to have a natural explanation. In fact, if you look up science, in the modern dictionaries, you will find underneath the definition of science, it will say a quest for naturalistic explanations of answers and discussions. That's what you will hear. Now, here's the problem with that. The problem with that is that's not how science was done in the past. You didn't make make sure you only had a certain kind of answer. In fact, in the past, science was you find the answer that best answers all of the evidence. You find the answer. Now let me show you what happens when you say, we're just going to limit it to naturalistic explanations. Here's what happens. Here's why that's a problem. Suppose you go to somebody's house and there has been, somebody has been called, the police have been called, and there is a mystery that they're trying to figure out. This is tongue-in-cheek a little bit, but there's an apple that is in the backyard of a person's house that they don't know where it came from. And the police have called you in as an investigator to discover how this apple got here and what's going on with it. And right there on the side of the apple, there's a chunk that is off of the apple. And the people who have called you in say, we'd like for you to find out how this chunk got out of this apple, but there's one stipulation. You can't say any human had any part to play with the chunk being taken out of the apple. You say, okay, well, let's see what we can do. So you pick up that apple, you've got your gloves on so you don't mess up any of the evidence, and you start looking at it, and it looks an awful lot like to you that somebody took a bite out of the apple. So you go to the person's house, and you knock on their door, and you say, hey, if you don't mind, I know this is kind of an odd question, but do you happen to have your dental records on you? Like I said, odd, most of us did, but it just so happens this person has been to the dentist just today, and they were going to get some work done on their teeth, and they did have their dental records right in their back pocket. So they handed them for you, and you say, oh, well, that's so convenient, really appreciate that. And you take the dental record, and you compare it to the chunk that's out of the apple. And the bite mark matches their dental records perfectly. And you think, okay, another long shot here, but you wouldn't happen to have your DNA that's mapped out anywhere. Have you done any of those ancestor things or anything like that? I say, yeah, I just so happened to do one yesterday. I was working on some family history and did one of those, and so you swab the place that chunk is out of that apple, and you swab it, and you test that swab. It looks like there's something wet there. Turns out it's some kind of saliva. There's DNA, and that swab DNA matches the person in the house's DNA exactly. And you say, okay, we got dental records that match perfect. We got DNA that matches perfect. We use just the apple for fingerprints, and sure enough, there's a fingerprint on the top, and there's a fingerprint on the bottom with a little partial print on the side. And you say, one more time. I know this is another long shot, but you don't happen to have your fingerprints anywhere. And they're like, oh yeah, hey, just dusted for those 2 days ago because I was getting a passport, and boom, got those. So they hand them to you, matches the apple perfect. So you go to the person who has called you over to find out how the chunk came out of the apple, and you say, we've got some pieces of evidence here that point directly to a singular conclusion. The DNA matches, the tooth mark matches, the fingerprints match. I believe that this person held that apple, took a bite out of it, and threw it in their backyard. The person says, that's very interesting that you should come to that conclusion. While it does look like that, that's not an acceptable answer because we said you can't say that a human had anything to do with this chunk. You need to come up with another explanation that doesn't have anything to do with a human. Oh, so you don't want the best explanation that the evidence points to. Well, you could come up with another. You could say something like, well, maybe this apple was thrown out of the truck and it hit the side of this tree, and the bark on the tree caused it to have bite mark perfect incisions just like the person who lives in the house. And oh, that DNA, maybe somehow a slug and a worm and a beetle and a squirrel all ran across this apple and left a little piece of DNA that all got mixed up, and randomly all the slug and worm and squirrel and everything else DNA happened to look exactly like the DNA from, and you could go into some really outlandish, crazy ideas about how you might get that without a human being involved. Well, what's the best explanation? Really, what's the only explanation? You don't get a DNA perfect match from trying to combine a slug, a worm, and a squirrel. It doesn't ever happen. And so if you were to say, hey, the human is the best explanation, and they would say, yeah, well, you can't use that, you got to come up with something else, then you're going to come up with something else that doesn't make good sense when compared to the better explanation. So science is not the search for naturalistic explanations. That's not what it should be. Science should be the search for the best explanation. And so here's what we're just trying to find out. What's the best explanation for why this universe exists and how a human being is sitting on a pew tonight in South Carolina on January 11th? What's the best explanation for that? Now, from an atheistic perspective, here's what we're told. The best explanation, we're told, is that a singularity exploded and brought into existence this physical universe that we see. Let me give you some challenges to that explanation. We are told that we live in what is called a Goldilocks universe. Let me tell you what I mean by that. You know Goldilocks. Goldilocks and the three bears. You'll remember the three bears. They were sitting in their cottage one fine morning, and they got up to go down to their table and to eat porridge, and they said the porridge was too hot, and so they went for a walk. Now, I have some other ideas about that, because porridge, to me, reminds me of the oatmeal that I ate growing up. Now, the oatmeal I ate growing up was not oatmeal these youngsters these days eat. And what I mean by that is, oatmeal now comes pre-packaged, pre-sweetened. It's got dried fruit in it. You open it, and it tells you exactly how much water you need to pour in the little container, and then you put it in there, and it's already got the brown sugar. It's got all the cinnamon. Okay, when my mom would make oatmeal, she would make it in a silver pan on our stove. Stick that spoon in it. And here's, I don't know if this really happened, but here's how it happened in my mind. Like, it would be so sticky that when she stuck that spoon in there, pulled it out, it would come out in the cylinder. It all came out. And I remember thinking, what can I do to not feel like I'm eating oatmeal? Because I felt like if you could eat it for breakfast and your horse outside could have the rest of it if you didn't finish it, I felt like something was wrong with it. I just really did. And so as much milk, as much butter, and as much sugar, and you just swallowed all at once almost like a pill, so you didn't think you were eating oatmeal. That's what I think is going on with the bears and porridge, but I don't know. It could be a long shot. But anyway, they leave. Goldilocks comes in. She sits down at Daddy Bear's bowl of porridge, too hot. Mama Bear's bowl of porridge, too cold. Baby Bear's bowl of porridge, just right. So she eats all that, and she's full now, and she goes into the living room where there are 3 chairs. She sits in Daddy Bear's chair, too hard. Mama Bear's chair, too soft. Baby Bear's chair, just right. And then she sits there for just a little while, and then she decides she's really tired. She goes up to the beds, and Daddy Bear's bed is too lumpy, and Mama Bear's bed is too soft, but Baby Bear's bed, just right. Okay, the physicists who have no desire to bring God into the picture say, we don't know what's going on, but it looks like this universe is perfectly designed for human life to live on planet Earth. That's what it looks like. In fact, one guy said, it looks as though some super intellect has monkeyed with the physics. Now, let me show you what I mean by monkeyed with the physics. I want you to imagine, if you can, with me. You walk into a control room, and on this control room, there are 25 different dials. And each one of those dials has to be turned to the exact right thing in order for this universe to exist. To exist. Just to even work at all. Now think about this. If this control room were, let's say you got to turn all of these dials to get something to happen. Like, let's say you had a truck, and you had to turn all 25 of these to the exact right thing for your truck to start. Now, you understand how that goes. And what I mean is, Okay, if you've got a truck, it's gotta be in park. Most time you gotta be pressing the brake. You gotta have the right key. It's gotta be in the ignition. You have to turn the ignition. And there are 4 or 5 things that you have to have right in order for your car to start. Now, unless you've got the little fancy, some of y'all probably do, and you've been using this, this has been your opportunity to flex it. I can start my truck without getting in it from the living room, and you got the automatic start. I don't know if you got that. Who's got it? This guy got it? He got automatic start? Yeah, dude. I think somebody had it. He's been like, oh, I don't have to go out there and start. So, several things have to be involved. Okay, now this is, you got to have 25 things. But let me show you what I mean by 25 things. We're talking the foundational physics of the universe. And now, I'm not going to make it too complicated, but you're talking about the ratio of a proton to an electron. Or the value of the pull of gravity. We're just going to deal with that one, the value of the pull of gravity. Okay, you've got any number of possibilities that there's no physical constraints that would stop it from being anything else. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Let's say we need this Expo whiteboard marker to land right here in our experiment. Okay, the physics will allow it to land over here. The physics will allow it to land over here. If there was an explosion in this room, the physics would allow this Expo marker stuff to land anywhere. But we've got to get it to land right here. Now, with gravity, what the atheistic physicists recognize is, it could be anything. It could be any possible value. It could have any type of pull. But it's got to be, in order for the universe to work, well, let me show you what it's got to be. We've got 25 of these knobs. 25 of these. All right. If you have a decimal point, you go 0.1. That means you take something, you divide it into 10 parts, and you got 1 part. So we've got this dial. We divide it into 10 little segments around it. We got to get it on 1 of them. Okay, 0.01. We draw 100 lines on this dial. We've got to get it on 1 of the 100. 0.001. We draw 1,000 lines on the dial. We've got to get it on 1 of those lines. 0.00001, 10,000. Add another 0, 100,000. Can you imagine taking this dial, putting 100,000 little lines on it? Okay, now here's what you got. You walk into this room, you've got 25. This dial right here, 0.000 out to the 50th decimal place. That means it is so fine-tuned that you couldn't even do it with your hand. You would, if 50 decimal places is 0.0000, you're talking about like quadrillions, just on into those. And if we have an explosion in the room, it could be at any one of them. There's nothing that's keeping it go to 1. So you need this one at 1 to the 50th zero place. Oh, you need this one up here at 1 to the 30th zero place. You need this one right here at 1 to the 12th zero place. You need this one right here at 1 to the 42nd zero place. All 25 of them have to be perfect. Now, here's why your atheistic physicist recognizes the problem. You send a hand grenade into a control panel room and you want to blow up 25 different dials, and they've got to be on such precise lines that it's 50 decimal places out, and you need every one of them to be exactly right, or the truck doesn't start. You see why that's a problem? And here's why that's a problem, because there's something you know about explosions, and I know about explosions. Let's see what it is. So you got a 16-year-old boy. He says, "Mom, I'd like to go to the movies." She said, "Sure. What time does the movie start?" He said, "Oh, it looks like it's going to start about 6. She said, "Okay. Just clean your room, and you can go." He said, "No problem. I'll get it done." She's thinking, "No problem. I've seen the room. Looked like a hurricane hit it, and then a tornado went through it, and the flood dropping on it, and then looked like element stampede went through it. So I know it's going to take a while for you to get your room clean." So he says he's going to leave about 6 o'clock. 4 o'clock rolls around. She sees him sitting on the couch, messing with his phone. She says, "Have I done any cleaning?" He says, "Nah, I got it. I'll get to it." Respectful. He's not being disrespectful. But she said, "Okay." 5 o'clock rolls around, she knows how messy it is. She says, have you cleaned your room? He said, oh, I got it. 5:30 rolls around. Well, so now she's getting aggravated. She walks by. She said, you're not going. He said, Mom, I thought we had a deal. She said, we did, and I know what your room looks like, and I know it can't be properly cleaned in 30 minutes. He said, Mom, I thought we had a deal. If I get my room clean, I get to go move. She said, well, that's what we got. He said, I've got it. 5 minutes till. She has in her mind the lecture she is about to give her son about irresponsibility and any host of things. He walks up the stairs. She thinks, what is he going to do in 5 minutes? What's going on? He goes into his room, grabs everything he's got, pulls it all in a huge pile in the middle of his room, pulls a stick of dynamite out from behind his back pocket, sticks it in there, lights it, walks it. I know, where does a 16-year-old come up with dynamite? Work with me. This is illustration. Anyway, blows it up. Okay, his mom is frantic. She rushes up the stairs, throws open the door, and what does she see? Well, I mean, you know what explosions do. All of the clothes that were supposed to be hung, when that explosion occurred, the hangers split off of the hanging rod, flew through the clothes that needed to be hung, boomerang grabbed them and flipped them in the closet, color coordinated on the way back. All of the clothes that needed to be folded, flipped through the air, folded perfect. The drawers from the, I hope I don't have to tell this, but it's not Chester drawers. It's the chest of drawers. That's what it's not a Chester drawer. From the chest of drawers, flipped perfectly into an abundant clothes. Here is the fascinating thing. The socks somehow are all matched. Even as the explosion occurred, there was a huge air suction that pulled the ones up from the basket on top of the dryer that matched the unmatched socks in the 16-year-old's top drawer. Perfect. Now that's ridiculous. Well, because you didn't have enough dynamite. 2 sticks would be better. You didn't blow it up enough times. 4 times would be more. Do you understand? And this is not good. That it is ridiculously easier for a stick of dynamite to straighten up a young man's room than a big explosion to get the universe perfect. And you're talking about easier by 0, 0, 0, 0, massive amounts of money. So, here's the simple question. What causes order? What brings about design? I'm going to give you an explanation by one of the leading atheists in the world. A guy I debated in 2009. His name is Dan Barker. He was in a debate with a guy by the name of Phil Fernandez. And Fernandez was really, pressing on this issue of explosions don't cause order. And he said, Dan Barker's this guy's name, co-president of Freedom from Religion Foundation, a very, very famous atheist. He said, Dan, give me one example of where explosions bring about order. Now, this is one of the leading atheists in the world on national stage. Give me one example. Here's what Dan Barker said. He says, okay, I've got one. When you get into your car and you crank it, the explosions in those cylinders that make those pistons go up and down cause your car to go, and it gets you to the grocery store, and that explosion brings about order. At first sounds real good, until Phil Fernandez says, "Damn, who designed and made that car?" He said, "Thank you for giving us a great example of where order comes from. If you're ever going to get energy that brings about order, you have to have an intelligent designer that puts the thing together that gets you to order." There's not one example of anywhere where an explosion brings about any type of higher level order. It doesn't happen. But we know what does. We know what brings about order. If you walk into a room and there are a bunch of Scrabble tiles on somebody's desk and the Scrabble tiles write out, "Hello, Kyle, good to see you." Nobody ever assumes that that is because they were randomly tossed into the air and they fell into meaningful letters in order. How do you get "Hello, Kyle, good to see you"? An intelligent mind has to be behind the construction of what you're looking at. Now, the simple question is just this. Is the universe very, very well ordered? That's the biggest understatement you can possibly make. We're talking to the degree that if it was a knife's edge or a razor's edge or a hair's breadth, as little as you can imagine the thing, that's what the universe is balanced on. Order doesn't come from explosion. Now, we also then say, it's the same statement, but if you see design, you know there had to be a designer. You've probably heard the statement, "For every house is built by someone, but he who built all things is God." Here's all that means. You walk into the woods and you see a house, and it's got some real complicated stuff. But just before I got here, I did a lot of YouTube watching. Now, I'm not a fix-it man, generally speaking, not great at it. But when you're sitting in 28-degree snowy weather and your water heater goes out, you feel compelled by certain people in your house to see if you can do anything about water heating. I learned all kinds of stuff about water heating this weekend. And ultimately learned a word that I've been hearing in, like, I'm going to flex on you that I know something, circles, that, who knows what a thermocouple is? Okay, I know you got, okay, that's it, because here's what I mean by that. I know some people know what a thermocouple is. I had no idea what a thermocouple is. Learned about it this weekend and ordered one from Home Depot and stuck it under my hot water heater and learned that, hey, that thermocouple is something that allows you to make sure that the pilot light is, okay, I'm not going to explain too much about it because I don't know that much. But here's what I do know. A water heater is a lot more complicated than I thought. Now, you walk into a woods area and you see a house that's got electricity, plumbing, and a water heater, and all of the plumbing comes up from the bottom, and the wires come through the top, and you've got all kinds of stuff going on. Where'd that come from? You know somebody had to design it. Design always demands a designer. Now, as you look at that concept of design demanding a designer, do you see design in this physical universe? Well, we see it physically from gravity and the ratio of protons and electrons, but we also see it in the animal kingdom. I'm going to tell you about a beetle. It's called the diabolical armored beetle. Now, it's about this big. And you're talking about an inch. You can take my GMC Sierra truck, and when that beetle is walking across the road, you can run over the beetle. Sit on it for about a minute, and then drive on by. Do you know what that will do to this diabolical armored beetle? Nothing. It doesn't swish. It can handle thousands of times its own weight and not be injured at all. In fact, we don't know how to mimic the armor on the diabolical armored beetle. We can pull it apart, we cross-section it, we've looked at it, we see how it does it, we can't copy it. Let me tell you what it would look like. If we could make that same armor and put it on a human being, you're talking about way past Marvel's comic strip stuff. If I could wear the same armor that this beetle has, I could lay down in this floor and you could pull a double-decker bus and smack it right on top of it. 20,000 pounds. I would look from underneath that double-decker bus and say, what else you got? You could then pull in another double-decker bus, put it right on top of that one, if you had a good enough balance. I would then say, if I had equivalent armor to the diabolical armor beetle, what else you got? You could bring a third one. Still don't even feel it. Fourth, fifth, you could bring 100 double-decker buses at 20,000 pounds apiece and pile them on my chest. And I would look at you in my eye and say, not even close yet. 220 double-decker buses you could pile on my chest if I had the armor of a little beetle that we can't even copy. Now, do you think our best engineers have been trying to copy this? Wouldn't it be awesome if you had that kind of armor that if you got shot by a 50 caliber rifle, it wouldn't hurt you at all? Wouldn't it be amazing if somebody literally could pile 100 buses on you and it wouldn't hurt you? We can't even copy it. There's obvious design, and that design is superior to anything we've ever seen humans come up with. Now, you don't have to just go for the animal. Do you know what the most well-designed, complicated, complex 3 pounds of matter in the universe is? We've got about 60 of them in here tonight. They say they feel like unbaked bread dough if you poke them. Now here's what's fascinating. You don't have any pain receptors in your brain. So once the person got past your skull, they can poke around on it and you would feel pressure, but it wouldn't hurt you. All right, in your head, there are 3 pounds of matter. It takes up the equivalent of about, cubic centimeter wise, about, I think it's 10 to 16 tennis balls. That's the cubic centimeter size of the average human brain. You can process information at 270 miles per hour. You've got the capability, although I think some of us would like to deny that we do, that you've got the capability to learn 40 different languages. You can learn the information that now this is how I would put it. You can learn the information that was in, I think it was something like 300 sets. Now, this is how old this illustration is. 300 sets of encyclopedias. I'm going to let that sink in. Encyclopedia. That's right. I mean, that word we almost go. A single encyclopedia is about 1,000 pages. A set of them is about 28 per set. So you got about 28,000 pages apiece per set, and you multiply it by 300, and that's how much stuff you can put in your brain. And we really haven't even come to the end of all of it. There was a book that I listened to not long ago, fascinating book, about a woman that the title of it was The Woman Who Never Forgets. She said she had memories when she was 9 months old. Remembered most of the stuff in her life from 3 to 6. Most of it from 6 to 14, but never forgot a thing that she ever did from 14 to when she was 50-something. Said she knew something was wrong with her. Because she would be sitting with people and say, hey, you remember when we did so-and-so? They're like, we didn't do that. She said, yeah, you wore that blue dress and I wore this and this was playing on TV when that happened. I was like, no, you make that up. And she said after she said that so many times, she realized other people didn't remember stuff like that. So she sees this doctor who deals with people who remember a lot of stuff and goes to him and he says, okay, we're going to give you this test and see if you've got hyperthyroidism, if you really, really do remember like some of the most greatest people who remember stuff ever. He gives her the test. He's kind of disappointed in the results because it wasn't supposed to be that hard and she misses one. And he says, well, I'm not sure you really can. She said, why? He said, well, because this question right here on November the 12th, 1983, we asked you if something happened and you didn't put anything. She said, well, because it didn't happen that day. It happened the day before. And he's like, no, we've been giving this test forever. forever, and I know it happened that day, and that's just not right. She's like, no, I remember exactly where I was. I was wearing this shirt. My dad had come in right here. This was on TV. I remember all of it. He's like, nah, that's just not right. She said, look it up. Okay, so he does. Looks it up. Sure enough, she's exactly right. She's remembered everything that she's ever said or anybody's ever said to her for the last 38 years. Can you imagine that? I can't. And, yeah, well, you know what was interesting was she didn't like it. Because she said when she would think about the time she had gotten mad at somebody, the emotions of her being mad at somebody. Or when she had think about a time when somebody had yelled at her and she was frustrated or she was scared, the emotions of being frustrated, like she relived it over and over and over and over. Now, you've got a computing device in your head that not only can it remember all this stuff, and you can sit there and listen to me, and you can process all that, but at the same time, it is shooting 50 different chemicals into your body to make sure your body's regulated perfectly. It's gauging the temperature the whole time to make sure you don't overheat. It's making sure your heart pumps exactly like it's supposed to. It's growing and helping grow all of the cells that are in your body, and all that stuff's going, you're not even thinking about it. It's the doctor of your body. It's the manager of your body. It runs everything. And that brain then allows you to cognitively think and have a conversation and watch somebody and think about what's happening and hear things. So there's a supercomputer in Japan that it took them 10 years to build. It cost them $1 billion. Now we throw around billions like it's not a whole lot. $1 billion is 999,000 million plus 1,000 million. $1 billion. 10 years, $1 billion takes up the room of 2 tennis courts. So you're talking, take this auditorium and double it just about. If you go all the way back there, double it. Take this auditorium and go all the way back there, double it. That's about 2 tennis courts. It can do 500 quadrillion functions per second. Now here's the problem. It uses 2,400 megawatts of power an hour. Like 2,400 megawatts. Now, like I said, I'm not really a physics person and I don't know a lot about electricity. Mega means, I think, 1,000 in that case. 2,400,000 watts of energy an hour. And it heats up so fast that most of that is to cool it off, or it would just melt all to pieces. 500 quadrillion functions per second. That's impressive. Your brain takes up 16 tennis balls worth of room. It uses, listen to this, 12 watts of electricity an hour. That uses 2,400 megawatts. Your brain uses 12 watts. And you can do double the function. You can do 1 quadrillion functions per second when it can only do half. And a decent sized Twinkie will work for you to feel for at least a minute. You shove a Twinkie in a supercomputer, see what happens. I mean, kids have tried with stuff, with electronics at home. And I think I don't know if it was my house or one of my buddies that was pulling cookies out of the old school DVD players. One of the kids thought, oh, you just beat around stuff. Okay, is the human brain an example of design? It's the most superior design that anybody has ever seen. Literally. Where does design always come from? Always an intelligent design. Now, if you work through a system that says you can't use an intelligent designer as an answer, you have to find something naturalistic. And then you ask me the question, well, what in nature naturalistically ever brings about design in the world? There's not anything. There literally is not anything. So you have to come up with something like a huge explosion, and then you have to say, I know we just said an explosion, but we know explosions don't bring about order, but in this case it had to because our answer has to be naturalistic. You see the problem? Okay, if we know that every single example where we know the origin of design is always a designer, an intelligent designer, and this universe exhibits design, then what is the logical, honest conclusion? Therefore, this universe had an intelligent designer. The leading atheist in the world in about 55 up to about 2000 was a man by the name of Antony Flew. He was from England, United Kingdom. He had written a paper called Theology and Falsification that he presented to the Socratic Society that C.S. Lewis was chairing at the time. It's the most widely published atheistic philosophical paper ever printed in the last 5 decades. Now it's in the last 7 decades, if I understand it correctly. It was more published, more printed, more written on. It was the atheistic philosophical paper that basically was the backbone for lots of atheistic thinking for the last 50 years. Antony Flew was debating a man by the name of Thomas B. Warren in Denton, Texas in 1976. It was a 4-night debate, 2 hours every night, on the existence of God. They had 5,000 people show up every single night. And in Antony Flu's book that he put out with a man by the name of Abraham Martinez in 2006, the title of it, Antony Flu's Leading Atheist in the World book, There Is No God. In that book, he says that's the most people I've ever spoken to publicly in face-to-face situations. 1976. In 1976, Thomas Warren gets down to this discussion of design. And he's talking about how design always demands a designer. And he puts up a picture. Now, this was overhead. This was old school overhead projector. Some of you might remember that. It was where there would be a light that comes up on this glass-plated machine, and that light would go through a clear plastic sheet, and it would hit this mirror that would project it on the wall. Overhead. Some of you are like, I had some professors that use those. Some of you are like, yeah, I invented that thing back in the Okay, I don't know if we got any of those. All right, so you got this over here. He puts up a picture of a prosthetic limb, artificial hand. Now, in 1976, artificial hands were not complicated. Not like they are today. And it was probably 20 years ago now. I need to kind of upgrade this probably. But there was a paper done on an artificial arm, a prosthetic arm, that a doctor by the name of Dr. Kukin was the one who was heading up this research project. The arm itself cost $4 million. Weighed 10 pounds, made out of a real lightweight metal alloy. They hooked it to this particular 26-year-old Marine. She had lost her arm in a driving accident, a car accident. I think it actually was a motorcycle accident. And they put this 10-pound metal arm on her shoulder, take the wires from it, and hook them to the nerves from her shoulder that would have been connected to her arm. And they say, okay, now move your pinky. Well, if I understand it right, when they first hooked it up and said, move your pinky, she moved a different finger on the prosthetic limb. And they said, okay, we're going to work through this. That's not your pinky. Try the one you think is your thumb. Okay. So then, like, she figured out how to work the digits of the prosthetic limb with the nerves that were hooked from her shoulder into the wires that went down to the motors of the digit. Dr. Kukin said, we've never seen anything. He said, she can do stuff with prosthesis with her new 10-pound metal alloy on that we've never seen anything like. She can take a jar of spaghetti with one hand and take the other hand and hold the spoon and scrape the spaghetti sauce out of the spaghetti jar. She can fold a pair of pants and not use a hard surface. We've never seen anything like it. Costs $4 million just to make. That's not counting the research and development that's behind it. Dr. Warren puts up a picture of a 1976 prosthetic limb and says, Dr. Flew, did this hand have a designer? this artificial limb that you're looking at on the screen, this prosthesis, did it have an intelligent design? What's Blue have to say? Yeah. Okay, that's no brainer. Okay, yeah. Yes, that had a design. Okay, it doesn't seem like there's a punchline to that. Dr. Warren takes that picture, puts up another picture of a human hand. And he said, Dr. Flew, does this hand have a design? Now let's go back to Dr. Kukin. Dr. Kukin said this is the most advanced prosthetic technology anybody's ever seen. But, he said, it's clumsy. Clumsy compared to what? Oh, just your regular hand. Let's take a hammer and smash the finger of a 10-pound metal alloy $4 million prosthetic limb. What are you going to have to do to fix that? Well, number one, hope you had good insurance. Because, I mean, if you scratch a fiberglass car these days, it's $3,500 for a repaint thing. I mean, if you smash a finger of a 4-pound metal alloy, 10-pound, $4 million, wait a week and see what happens. Wait a month. Nothing. Now let's say you're out working, you accidentally smash your finger. You know what your body does immediately? It sends an enzyme down to your finger that begins to dissolve the little pieces of bone that you don't need. Aren't you glad that doesn't get out of control? You wake up one morning and it started producing too much of that and sent it down to your hand. You don't have any bones in there. Okay, it knows, your body knows exactly what pieces of bones need to be dissolved and what pieces of bones need to be moved back into place. So while you have smashed your finger, number one, there's a 22 chemical cascade that begins to occur within seconds to make a blood clot that goes only to the capillaries, veins, and arteries that you smashed, and none of the other ones because you don't get the clot blood anywhere else. And then you have an enzyme that goes straight to the bones that need to be eaten away. Your body starts moving the pieces that are big enough back into place, and you come back in 6 weeks, and you might have a crooked finger. Sometimes they're not even crooked, but a lot of times they don't go back exactly straight. But sometimes it's stronger where you broke it than it was before you broke it. And now what happened to that metal alloy finger? Still broken. You take a knife and you cut one of the wires of that motor that hooks the motor to the finger, it stays cut. You accidentally cut your artery or vein, it immediately begins to repair. Dr. Warren said to Dr. Flew, did this hand have a design? If he wants to remain the world's leading atheist, what does he have to say? Well, if he wants to remain the world's leading atheist, he's got to say that human hand did not. If he wants to be honest with the evidence, what's he got to say? In 1976, he said, no, it didn't happen. Dr. Flew said, where did it come from? I mean, Dr. Warren said that to him, where did it come from? And the atheist Dr. Flew said, well, it just grew there. That was in 76. Now, at the beginning of his book in 2006, he wrote, I have always tried to follow the evidence where it leads me. Let me tell you again what the title of his book was. There is no God. The world's leading atheist for the last 50 years writes a book. He marks out the no. And the title of the book is There Is a God, How the World's Most Notorious Atheist Became a Believer. And he said, I've always tried to follow the evidence where it led me. And in 1976, I thought it led me to atheism. He said, scientifically now, we have too much information for that to be true. DNA by itself shows you that there is a mind behind the construction of this universe. And that mind has to be a supernatural, all-powerful, all-knowing, eternal God who brought this universe into existence. All God has ever asked anybody to do is follow the evidence where it leads. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth is the most scientifically accurate statement that's ever been penned. It has been for the last 3,500 years, and it will be till that God comes again to take his own with you to heaven. And if you are following the evidence where it leads, that evidence leads to a single conclusion. In the beginning, God. I sure appreciate you being here tonight. We're going to take about a 5-minute break. If you've got any questions that you want to put right here or just put them up on the table somewhere, just hand them to me. We'll try to answer those after this next session. And we'll start back in about 5 minutes. I've never seen an audience of this size get back in 5 minutes. Good luck with that. We'll start when most everybody gets back.